hope everyone is doing well. So I wanted to talk to you all today a bit about research and planning as you get into creating your outline for your research essay, working through note taking, all of the pieces that you'll be working with to put together the argumentative research paper. I'm in the process of returning annotated bibliographies. Again, I grade in the order things come in, so I'm getting those back as quickly as I can. There are still some position papers that I'm working on as well, so I'm grading annotated bibliographies so that you all can move forward with your research project. So I'll talk a bit about note-taking, quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, in-text citations, a little bit of works cited review. Really, it's less of an overview and more of a review at this point. And I'll talk a little bit about outlines and topic sentences. So, first of all, note-taking. I am a very visual and tactile person, so I actually go old school and use note cards. I know that many of you are working with electronic sources, many of you will be working in word processors rather than doing this on paper. It's absolutely fine to do that. I will mention though, if you are the kind of person who needs to see everything laid out in front of you, using 3x5 or 4x6 lined note cards is a great way to take your notes and organize your information. That said, if you don't want to go buy note cards, or if the idea of having to handwrite everything is not appealing to you, you can always just put your notes in word processor and leave some space between them. And then later, if you want to move your materials around, you can actually print those out and cut them apart and put information in order that way. I did that when I was working on my master's thesis. That can be a good way to do it too, when you want to make sure you have everything electronic and not worry about keeping up with paper stuff. But you will note that I have here to label your note. So whenever I work with note cards, I work with the old school lined 3x5 note cards. So if I were to take notes on it, and let's say I was going to quote, I would put the information in quotation marks, and I would go ahead and include the parenthetical citation for that info, whatever that might be. Author, last name, page number, whatever is appropriate for the source that I'm working with. So whenever you have these note cards like this, they're typically going to have a red line at the top. Mine's blue because, you know, working and collaborate here. Later in the process, when we have our sentence outlines done, you can go in and key your cards to your outline. So let's say that whatever I had written about here, I was going to use in section 2A of my paper. I can put that here, and then I'll be able to organize my notes in the order that follows the outline and type my paper up from my notes and outline. Now, if you were to paraphrase instead of quote, you could go ahead and put a note on here that it was a paraphrase. If you summarized, you could write that down. Make sure you label those notes though. You may think that you'll remember whether you paraphrased or quoted. You may think you remember which source you got the information from, but you've got a lot going on, and there's going to be a lot in your head and a lot of information down in your notes you're going to forget. So please make sure you label everything carefully from the get-go. Another thing that I do when I'm working in note-taking, I will make a source card for each of my sources, and I will put the works cited entry on that source card, and then at the top of the source card, I will go ahead and put in that in-text citation as it would appear in my text, so that I've got that written down. So make sure you have all of your citation information. I know people have done annotated bibliographies already, but if you have additional sources, if you find something new, make sure you get that information down. So take notes, label your notes. All right. Quick review, quote. Remember that when you're quoting, you're using the author's exact words. You're putting them in quotation marks, unless it's a block quote. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And you're anchoring that quote in your sentence. A quote should not be by itself in a sentence. You always need to somehow integrate that in your text. You need to cite your quotes, and the quote should be something that is necessary to your work. It's not something you're just throwing in there to meet a length requirement or to meet a quoting requirement or a source requirement. You want to make sure that what you're working with actually fits, what you're quoting actually fits what it is that you're working on. So we'll give you an example here of a quote integrated in the text, first with an introductory phrase and then with a phrase at the end. You'll notice that in the first example, I've used the author's name in the sentence, so I don't need it here in the in-text citation. In the second example, I didn't do that, so I included the author's name. If it's clear whom you're referring to, you don't have to put the name in there, but if it's not, if there could be any question about it, make sure that you do. So why do we quote? First of all, sometimes the original writer says it best, or maybe you need the credibility of the quote, or maybe you're using that quote as hard evidence for a point you're trying to make. And of course, there's also the fact that we sometimes run into information that's just too hard to paraphrase. When you're dealing with highly specific terminology or statistics, it can be really hard to paraphrase. So when do you want to paraphrase? When you're paraphrasing, you are using your words and sentence structure, okay? You are not just going through the author's sentence or paragraph and changing a few words. You are completely putting this in your own words and in your own format. You do preserve the original author's idea, and you do cite the information. You still cite for paraphrases. So I give you an example of the previous information paraphrased here. Why should we paraphrase? It gives your text this feeling of continuity. Not having that shift in voice from yours to another author can be nice. When you are paraphrasing, it shows that you're familiar with the work that you're using. To paraphrase well, you have to understand the material. It's really hard to fake your way through a paraphrase. And a lot of quotes can overwhelm your text. One of the things that I encourage students to do when they're worried about using too much source information is to make sure that anytime you bring in evidence from outside sources, you're introducing the concept, you're having your quote or your paraphrase, and then you are discussing that. And that, I call this a quote sandwich when you're doing it with quotations. That will prevent your work from being overwhelmed with quoted information. And paraphrasing also makes it feel more like your work and not just a patchwork of information you've gotten from other places. A research paper isn't just taking information and patching it together. This argumentative paper, you're creating a stance on the topic that you're writing about. So it's not just gathering information and sticking it together. You've got to reason it. You've got to tie those pieces together. There's a great illustration in They Say, I Say that shows sentences holding hands. Essentially, you can see hands reaching out. You have to transition from one point to the next. You have to connect all these parts. And paraphrasing helps make that a little bit more seamless. And then, of course, there's summarizing. With summarizing, you're condensing the main idea, you're omitting unnecessary detail. I often tell students to think about what would go in a summary in terms of what they would need their friend to tell them if they had forgotten to do the reading for class and we were about to have a quiz on a discussion. Now, when you're summarizing, you still need to credit it, you still need to cite it, and you need to indicate it's someone else's idea. When students write summaries for me, they don't do that. They just assume because the assignment was to summarize something that I know it came from somewhere else. You still have to put that information in there, and you have to frame it in a way that shows the information came elsewhere. All right, in-text citations. Let's talk about this. I've gotten a couple of questions about them in the last week. So we know we need to cite for a variety of reasons. We know we need to give credit to the original authors, the people who did the original work. We know that in scholarship, we need to leave a trail so that someone can go back and trace our work and do their own research. Also, keep in mind that when you're citing, that's a bit of an insurance policy. If somebody turns out to be wrong later and you clearly cited it, the onus is on them, not you. So the in-text citation refers the reader to the works cited page. The in-text citation is the short version that is not clunky and cumbersome to put in your text. In your in-text citation, you should have what comes first in the MLA works cited entry. It's usually going to be the author's last name and the page number if it's available. I recognize that some of you are working with articles that don't have page numbers. That's fine. If you see page numbers listed in the information on the record when you go to pull your source, you may be able to see the page numbers on the PDF. That's usually the case. The PDF will usually show the file as will usually show the article as it appeared in the original journal. The other lovely thing about in-text citations in MLA is there's no extra punctuation needed. There are no commas, there's no P period. It's just the author's last name and the page number, and that's it. So as you see here, you would close the quote before and you will put the period after. If you have two authors, you see how that looks. If you have numerous authors, that's when we use et al. I'll also mention that when you use et al., you should refer to the authors as plural. So the authors state, Anderson et al. Writes, Anderson et al. Argue, etc. So make sure that your subject-verb agreement matches. So at your paper and the author, and then jump to your works page and the rest of the information for that source. I noticed that a lot of you on the annotated bibliography assignment and some of you on the position paper assignment were using APA instead of MLA. We are just using MLA for this class. When you get English 112, APA will come into play, but for now, stick with MLA. All right, so a few special cases. If there's no author, you will go with the first part of the works cited entry, and usually that will be the article title, and you will shorten the title. So I'll give you an example here. This is an article that appeared on WREL this past fall. There was no author listed. Had title, of course, the publication information here, URL, access date, all that good stuff. So instead of writing out this giant title whenever you cite it, you can just shorten the title to a couple words. If you have multiple titles that start the same way, I doubt you will for this paper, but if it comes up, you will just make the title long enough that you can differentiate between the articles or among the articles. There more than. So for your works cited entries, make sure you follow the order. So with works cited entries, as many of you have picked up on, there can be a lot of pieces of information or there can be just a few. The most basic entry is for a book. The book is the most basic. All of the other citations follow this pattern just with additional information. So I've cited here Rick Bragg's The Best Cook in the World. Author, last name, first name, title of the book in italics, name of the publisher, and the year. Okay. Now, when you get into articles, you know, you'll have an article title here in quotation marks, the name of the publication in italics, a volume, an issue, a date, all that other stuff. But this is the most basic citation. And I mentioned earlier, I never will require you to memorize how to do works cited entries. But I will say, if there is an MLA citation you want to memorize, this is the one, because if you can remember this order, the order for all the rest will make a lot of sense. If you are citing a source and you're missing a piece of the information, skip it. You don't need to make something up. You don't need to say, I don't have it. You can just skip it. So like I just showed you with the example from WREL, there was no author, so we skipped the author and started with the article title. All right, so here's an example of a journal article found online. So we've got two authors. When you have multiple authors, you only need to invert the first author's name. Okay. Title of article, name of publication, volume, issue, date, pages, database, digital object identifier, if available, date of access. Okay, this is an old example, obviously, because you see it's accessed in May of 2009. Okay, so the next piece for you for this paper is the outline. Please keep in mind that I did kick the outline deadline out to Monday. I know there are spring breaks. I know that some people are behind. I know that I still am returning feedback on assignments. So if you want to turn it in earlier, fine. But if you want to take your time and take a deep breath, I did kick that deadline out to Monday night. Keep in mind, too, that I've provided a sample on our course site, and you can take a look at that. So as you outline, think about the major points you want to cover in the paper and just jot down some ideas. From those ideas, you can move to complete sentences, create a solid topic sentence for each area, and then for each paragraph. Now, just like with my concept of writing from the inside out that I've talked to you all about, it's perfectly fine to lay out the body of the essay first and then think about your thesis statement. For this outline, I do ask that you have complete sentences for your thesis and for your topic sentences. I do want to see a title. I want to see the major organization of your essay. So this outline is a formal sentence outline, so you will use Roman numerals and capital letters. If you want to go more detailed, you absolutely can. Keep in mind that the more detailed your draft is, the quicker and easier it will be to write your paper. But the other thing I want you to keep in mind is that the outline is a plan for your essay. It is a map. That said, it is not set in stone. I am not going to require that you 100% stick exactly to your outline. So maybe your thesis changes as you draft. Maybe you decide to reorganize your information. That is okay, but I want you to have a solid plan before you go into the paper. I think of it as a map, as I said. You know, you may, when you plan a trip, you map out the route you're going to take, but you may take a detour. You may stop somewhere you had not planned. Maybe something goes wrong on the road and you have to take a different route, or you have to stop and get something on your car fixed. And that's okay. That's not a failing. That's just how things go. As you may have already noted in the research process, you may have changed the direction of your essay. You may have changed the argument that you were waiting for, and that is okay. That is part of the process. So all that is to say, don't freak yourself out or panic about this outline. You're not, committing 100% to everything. But seeing this outline will let me give you feedback on your thesis statement. It'll let me give you feedback on your organization, and it will give you the map to start writing your paper. And having those topic sentences, having the thesis statement, having that organization down, definitely combats that sort of writer's block you get when you sit down in front of that blank word processing screen or in front of that blank sheet of paper with your pen. So I definitely encourage you to go ahead and get started on it, even if you need some time to think about it. Even though it's not due until next Monday now, give yourself some breathing room, put some ideas down. And, like I said, start with ideas. You don't have to sit down and write beautiful topic sentences from the get-go. You can write down a quick bullet point and then come back to it and think about how you want to word it. So don't drive yourself crazy, but start getting some of those ideas down. Whoops, I went too far and brought up an old slide from last semester. Sorry about that, y'all. A finger slipped on the button. So outline is where we are. That will be due on Monday. If you have questions or need help, let me know. I'll be doing some more videos this week. I've had some requests on sentence structure and punctuation and a few other items. So I'm going to keep cranking out videos as long as Collaborate cooperates. Today has not been a great cooperation day. You'll note that I'm not on camera because it won't let me use my camera today. So get in touch if you need me. Please also keep in mind that we'll have essay conferences. So you will have mandatory one-on-one help for your essay. Also keep in mind that you are required to use the Writing and Reading Center or the online writing lab. If you are feeling stuck or if you are having trouble, now is a great time to go meet with someone through the Writing and Reading Center. They're doing online virtual appointments. They're great. Please don't wait. If you need help, get it with them, make an appointment with me, or drop into office hours, whatever it is that you need. I hope you all are doing well. If I can help you at all in any way, please let me know. Have a wonderful rest of your week.